Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to um, calculate or have the calculator construct for me a histogram. I have already constructed a box and whisker plot from this data. I now want to construct a histogram. I've left my screen here on the one variable statistics where I can see that the minimum score is a 478 and the maximum score is a 593. If I'm going to make a histogram, I'm going to want to have an idea of what those scores are. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to simply allow the calculator to construct a histogram for me, and we'll explore what that will look like. So again, just like with the box and whisker plot, we press second stat plot. I'm going to select plot number 1. You'll notice my stat plot is still on, having already constructed the box and whisker plot. This time, I'm going to select the third graph to the right, which is the histogram. I press enter, and again, you'll notice the X list is still L1. That's the list that has the data in it, and the frequency list is 1. If I do the same thing here, simply go to zoom 9, like I did with the box and whisker plot, the calculator does appear to give me a decent histogram. But again, if I hit trace, I notice that there are 6 states, and again, I'm going to just say states. It's 51 states plus DC. So there are 6 states that have a SAT score, verbal SAT score, between 478 and 494.2. And if I cursor over, you see that those endpoints, left and right endpoints of each group, have these long decimals that I don't really want to work with. So the best thing to do is to do what I just did. Do a zoom 9, let the calculator approximate the values. Now I'm going to go back to my window. Okay, by letting the calculator do this, I see that my minimum is 478. My maximum is actually a little bit less than 609. I wrote down what we did before. We had a minimum from that 5-number summary. We saw a minimum of 478 with a maximum of 593. What I'm going to choose to do here is simply set my minimum to 450 and my maximum to 600, because that will encapsulate the low end of the scale as well as the high end of the scale. Okay, and then I'm simply going to, first I'm just going to go by 50s. I'm not going to bother to mess with, I could mess, I suppose, with the Y min and the Y max. It's not going to make much of a difference. So I'm just, in this case, going to leave them alone. I now press graph again. Oops, what did I do? Okay, so now if I press graph again, I should see so my scale, I went by 50s, right? I got a little thrown off because that graph looks a little confusing. 450 to 500, 500 to 550, and 550 to 600. So my confusion there, right? It's because, well, I've only got 3 groups. I've only got 3 classes, which is not very informative. The other thing you'll notice, right, is that there's no top. See, the box where the cursor is now, there is a top to the box. There is no top to these 2 boxes, or to those 2 bars of the histogram. Okay, I can see why. There are 22 scores between 500 and 550, and there are 18 scores between 550 and 600. So, and then notice my Y max is only 17.55. If I made my Y max 20, and now I press graph again, you'll notice that this box on the far right now does have a top, but the one in the middle doesn't. That's because, if you recall, the one in the middle has a maximum of 22, but my window is only set to a maximum of 20. So I might want to make that a 25, and now I see the tops of all 3 boxes. You'll notice, by the way, in the window, I left the Y min at a negative, and I left it kind of, a weird number. I could have made it, say, -5. No, my calculator is not going to like that. I'm going to make it a -5. And I have a little space at the bottom here. The reason I like to have that is when I press trace, this writing is not right on that value there. Okay, but also only 3 categories, only 3 classes is not very informative in my data. So what I might choose to do is, instead of going by 50s, I might choose to go by 25. So now instead of having 3 groups, I should have 6. Although you'll notice at the first bar here, there's a 0 because if I set my window from 450 to 600 by 25, so that means that that first box goes from 450 to 475. But recall the smallest piece of data was a 478. Oh, it's in there somewhere. The smallest piece of data was a 478. So what I might choose to do, and it takes a little playing around here, right? So let's go from 475 to 600, which is a range of 125 values. So, it's a tough number to divide by, but if I press graph, now I'm going to see my 5 groups and trace. There's 11 in this category from 475 to 500, and then 13, 9, 12, and 6. And 5 classes is probably pretty good there. I suppose I could go to 10 classes with a width of 15. No, that wouldn't be. So I might play around with that, but I'm just going to leave this here, and there is the histogram.